Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to all, and welcome back for the second day of the SESAR Joint Undertaking Digital Sky Demonstrator event. After listening from lessons learned across projects, and specifically from the U-ELCOME project yesterday, today our speakers will immerse us into the BURDI and ÉALÚ-AER projects. We have new participants, and as we care for everyone's health and safety, I will make a few emergency announcements, so bear with me. In case of an emergency, you can call the Eurocontrol team on site at the following numbers: 9000 or 02729000. If you need medical assistance, please refer to the Eurocontrol Medical Center outside of the conference area. And in case of evacuation, please follow the green exit sign, and as on board an aircraft, remind that the nearest exit might actually be behind you. Now, we have the privilege to welcome a prominent lineup of keynote speakers. And Mr. Andreas Boschen, our very own SESAR Joint Undertaking Executive Director, will deliver his welcome remarks. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Boschen.
Thank you, Christelle. Good morning. Good to see almost a full room, and I guess the colleagues finishing their coffee will join us. Welcome back to the second day. Yesterday we saw much progress has been made in the U-space, and yesterday it was about the project U-ELCOME. I think it's very clever to start with the Welcome project. And this has, of course, shown how U-space's services can move from concept to reality across multiple European sites. Together with Jan-Christophe, we just had a discussion with them, and we could really see that it was a European project. And this is, of course, laying the foundation for scalable drone operations. And today our focus shifts to two further SESAR digital sky demonstrators, BURDI and, I try to speak as Irish as I can, ÉALÚ-AER. These regional projects are making important contributions to Europe's wider efforts to modernize its aviation system. BURDI is also very European. It's Belgium and the Netherlands. It is setting the blueprint for how dense and complex drone operations can be managed safely. Deliveries, inspections in harbors, medical flights, and even urban mobility. Let's dream about urban mobility. Meanwhile, in Ireland, in Shannon, ÉALÚ-AER, first digital sky demonstrator, is testing everything, and our colleagues just told us they are testing everything from long-distance logistics to future air taxis, public service missions, while also exploring how citizens and businesses can embrace these new services. Altogether, these projects are helping us take concrete steps towards ensuring safety, sustainability, and competitiveness. This is innovation delivering real benefits for citizens and businesses alike. We are fortunate this morning to be joined by two distinguished speakers, and I will say friends of SESAR, who are shaping the political context. First, Jan-Christophe Oetjen, member of the European Parliament. You are very active in the TRAN committee. You are a strong advocate for innovation in transport and ensuring that Europe's aviation sector remains forward-looking and competitive. And Christine Berg, Deputy Director for Aviation, and now the Head of Unit for Aviation Safety, including EASA, including drones, at the European Commission. Christine and her team, and I saw also team members around, you are at the center of the European Commission's work on drones and U-space. You are providing the regulatory framework, and I think you're also benefiting from the experience these projects are giving back to you. That allows innovation to take place safely and securely. And without further ado, can I ask Jan-Christophe to deliver his keynote speech? Jan-Christophe.
So let me say first, thank you, Andreas, and from my side as well, good morning to everyone. Very happy to be here among friends, and I'm happy to see familiar faces. I'm very pleased to co-open the second day of SESAR Digital Sky Demonstrator event, and the three projects that are displayed, so namely U-ELCOME, you said it already, BURDI and ÉALÚ-AER, are no future promises. They are operational solutions being tested and deployed today. And for me, it's really great to see this, that we're not only in the phase of innovation to level 6, but that we go further. That we went just until level 8, we heard from ÉALÚ-AER. So this is really, I think, how this should be done. So I'm truly impressed and deeply satisfied to see what we have achieved in practice. These concrete results are, these concrete projects are the result of outstanding cooperation between European institutions, private sector, EU funding, SESAR's technical leadership, and my sincere congratulations to everyone who contributed to them. My message today is clear. I'm here because I want to support you. I want to support the drone environment, and I want to support the future of, let's say, U-space and advanced air mobility, and I want to help to keep the momentum on civilian drones. This event proves it. The civilian drone revolution is no longer a distant vision or a niche technology, it's a reality. And it's a global race where we as Europeans have to accelerate our speed. In the US, President Trump's executive order of June 6, 2025, you know the modest title that he chose, it's called Drone Dominance, moves the country from cautious trials to full-scale commercial operations by 2026. It forces FAA to legalize nationwide autonomous BVLOS flights within 8 months, funds a national eVTOL pilot project, and ties federal subsidies to Buy American drones. Meanwhile, behind the, let's say, equally modest named Chinese concept of low-altitude economy stands the world's largest production hubs for civilian drones. Chinese manufacturers produce 70 to 80% of all civilian drones worldwide and are heading towards an 80 billion market in 2025. This all sounds familiar, doesn't it? Once again, Europe is pioneering a future-proof technology, yet risks falling behind when it comes to scaling up. That's exactly what I want to prevent. We need to learn from the mistakes of other industries. Europe has a solid and globally first harmonized drone regulation. This is very good, but you know only rules doesn't make fly drones, right? So in my view, there are some things that are still missing, and I want to name 3 of them. First, we don't need to reinvent the wheel when it comes to our existing drone legislation and strategy, but we need to do a reality check. Small targeted changes that can have a big impact for the uptake of drone operations. And I want to give you an example. It's the pesticide directive currently prohibiting precision drone spraying. And when it was adopted in 2009, no one imagined that aerial spraying could ever be done by drones instead of helicopters or crop dusters. So we need a targeted amendment as part of simplification efforts to unlock this technology. Furthermore, we must ensure that all airspace users in the low-altitude environment become electronically visible to each other as soon as possible. Only through an interoperable system, airspace users can safely avoid each other, and in the case of drones, such avoidance could even happen always automatically. So electronic conspicuity, I hate this word to be honest, why don't we say electronic visibility or something like that? Would be easier for policymakers like me. Will, in my opinion, become the most efficient and cost-effective long-term solution for the safe integration of drones into European airspace. It will also play a key role in enabling the large-scale commercialization of drone technologies. It works in a decentralized way, which means it functions independently of how many drones are flying and can therefore be easily scaled up. Once mass-produced, EC modules will be inexpensive and easy to install. But most importantly, they create a real sense of safety and therefore of public trust. And this public acceptance is my second point. People must become more aware of the benefit of drones. And the best way to achieve this is through tangible success stories like the ones we see today. I'm convinced once someone has a positive experience with a drone, their perception changes. But at the moment, especially in the political environment, we are talking about drone wall. We had this just a couple of minutes ago. So it's about How do we prevent drones coming to us? How do we prevent drone operations? And safety is perceived as something, as an airspace where there are no drones. When there are no drones, that's safe, right? So people have this fear, and we must ensure in the political debate that it's not only about it seen as a defense topic, but today the public still associates drones mainly with noise, privacy issues, or, as I said, the war in Ukraine. Yet, drones keep roofers off dangerous heights, deliver blood to hospitals within minutes, detect slowly starting wildfires before they erupt, and save hundreds of thousands of tons of CO2 because helicopters can remain grounded. And therefore, I think that we need to strike the right balance and move a bit from a risk-averse approach that tries to avoid any bad headlines towards a more risk-tolerant approach that puts more drones in the air so that more people can experience their benefits firsthand. And my third point will surprise no one. It's money. So we must ensure that drones benefit from the next multi-annual financial framework. Drones should be recognized as core enablers of climate action, civil protection, and industrial modernization. Clear, eligible rules and SME-friendly calls are essential. They will help startups scale faster and keep their value chains here in Europe. And I'm pleased to share that I'm not only voicing demands today, I can already announce some concrete results. At the end of June this year, together with colleagues from EPP and S&D, I organized a small drone summit in the European Parliament with 3 panels. As a result, we drafted a joint declaration from policymakers expressing exactly these priorities and concerns. And over 50 members of the European Parliament signed it. So 50 members, this is a little bit less than 10%. So it had a huge impact. We have sent the declaration to Commissioner Tzitzikostas, Vaheli, Kobilius, Labib, and Hansen. And the visibility for our cause is a major success. Just last week, Commissioner Tzitzikostas, who now leads on drones, responded to us that the Commission will launch a progress review of the Drone Strategy 2.0 in 2026, and maybe you can tell us a little bit more about this, Christina. And it intends to allow the use of drones for aerial spraying of plant protection products. And it recognizes the need for greater public awareness of civilian drone applications. I believe this is a step in exactly the right direction. And I'm equally glad that another project I've been championing for years now is taking shape. It's the European Trusted Drone Label. It builds on a parliamentary proposal I did for a pilot project. Its goal is to enable manufacturers to obtain a voluntary seal of quality confirming that their drones meet defined safety, cybersecurity, and reliability standards. This will create a tangible tool for trust, especially for critical and sensitive operations, and gives the European drone industry a clear competitive edge. The Commission is currently defining the criteria and establishing the certification and monitoring. I will make sure that the funding of my pilot project will continue beyond 2026. Make sure as far as I can make it sure, because it's not only my decision. But to sum up, civil drone revolution is a reality. And yes, it's a global race. But the European Union is part of this race, and today's events proves SESAR plays a central role in it. So let me stress this point. SESAR is a true success story. It's precisely this organization that creates the highly needed synergies between public and private sectors in such a field as integration of drones in airspace. And I'm firmly convinced that thanks to SESAR, that innovation in the drone sector was significantly accelerated. And the demonstrations that we see here today shows that this cooperation model delivers real change in the air and on the ground. Only through SESAR we can ensure that Europe's drone strategy gets a much needed reality check and practical implementation. That's why its financing, particularly in the next MFF, deserves to be continued and strengthened. So ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to express my full support, as I said, to the drone ecosystem. Together, let's keep up the momentum on drones, and let's help to bring SESAR to the next step. Thank you for your attention.
Many thanks, Jan-Christoph, for supporting us and for pushing us. And I think we need both. I think as SESAR community, we are ready to continue. We like innovation, we like research, and we even like more research into operations. And we can count on your support, and we are doing as a community whatever we can to make our case and to show that this is useful investment by the European Union. Without further ado, Christine, can you now deliver the second keynote, please?
Good morning to all of you. For me, it's a big pleasure to be back with SESAR, because I'm working with SESAR 2 since 2019, then who is now Executive Director of EASA, Florian Guillermet, Andreas' predecessor, was working with me on SESAR. Then we shaped SESAR 3, and since then we are working with Andreas. And the big novelty of SESAR 3 were the digital sky demonstrators. And it is very gratifying from a personal perspective to be here now and to see the digital sky demonstrators have taken life and they are happening. So it feels good to be back here. But it's also clear that we are at a critical point when it comes to scaling up drone services in Europe. We have to move from experimental stages via some of the demonstrators into full market implementation, and this is what we have to focus on. But as also it has been said, we have been making real progress in shaping a solid legal framework for drones. We have U-space rules adopted in 2021, and they were a major milestone with the objective of drones operating safely and efficiently alongside other airspace users, which is why we are meeting here in Eurocontrol. And now, as I said, we have to really move forward with implementation. We are all aware that we face constraints that prevent the sector from truly thriving. We see that the technology is there. We see a number of service providers are ready, but there isn't yet enough also demand to scale up drone operations and allow the market to flourish. We also have a call from the industry, but also from member states and public authorities for simplification. And I think we'll have to pay special attention also in this area on what can be done to introduce measures that make drone operations simpler, more sustainable, whilst keeping them safe. You have heard from yesterday, you discussed, and here you have heard, we have to rethink a bit on how we approach risk, which is a difficult and touchy item. And I'm glad to have heard from a member of the European Parliament that this is something which you are not excluding, because this is, when it comes to safety and security, at the core, a very democratic issue where we have to balance core public protection interests. And therefore, we will need to have a wide debate on it. When we coined our legal framework, we have said drone operations in Europe, we want them to be, as on aviation, the safest in the world. Maybe when being first, we have overshot in the one or the other area a little bit things. But that doesn't mean that we have to throw out the baby with the bathwater, because keeping things safe and secure with all simplification drive will have to be a balance we have to strike. With the EU Drone Strategy 2.0, we have also put forward a roadmap for building the drone services market and for supporting industrial capabilities across Europe. With the war in Ukraine on our doorstep, the world has significantly changed. And as it has also been said, the perception of drones has changed. And this is unfortunately negatively impacting on civilian services in relation to drones. So from a public authorities point of view, I entirely agree. Working on public perception, making sure that the public understands when you see a drone in the air, it's not something evil that is going after you, trying to kill you, but it can also save lives by transporting medicines, whatever, is a big challenge in these days. And we also have to be mindful that this is perceived differently in our member states along the eastern flank compared to the Mediterranean or the western tip of Europe. And from a European perspective, this is certainly not easy to deal with. But I think it should be an encouragement for all policymakers, why all the more we should focus and stay behind what we have developed, namely a risk-based drone and also VTOL policy. So we from the Commission will also use next year to see how we can rebuild the trust, ensure safety, and let this innovative sector take off in the right way with the announcement also of Commissioner Tzitzikostas that we are ready to embark on a review of a strategy that we have only adopted 3 years ago. So that shows also how dynamically things and paradigms are shifting. But again, having said that, we think, and it was also said by Jan-Christoph Oetjen, we have put forward the right roadmap. We don't need to completely change everything and start from scratch. On the contrary, that would be the wrong signal to the first movers. But we have to identify together with the industry, with the member states who are working on the first U-space designations, the points where we can make things simpler and quicker. China and the US were mentioned very clearly. This is a way of catching up where we thought we were first by creating our regulatory framework, but under completely different conditions. The US has traditionally always been more in all aspects of society. In the US, they were always taking more risks, letting people do it. Some refer to it as the Wild West mentality, but it is somehow still in the cultural fabric, and certainly with this current president, something that should drive the industry. And we also know that in China, it's a state that is driving everything and that is putting huge resources behind it. So we have to be very smart from the European perspective on how we set our next steps. And also clearly we have to do it together because individually with all the fragmentation, we unfortunately see already now with the framework we have created, also because it's a first, because there is not enough guidance, because there is not enough industry standards to implement it, we see that in the implementation of what is meant to be a uniform implementation, because we adopted European regulations, member states are trying to do something with it, but due to the lack of guidance and lack of industry standards, things turn out quite differently, and that will be an issue for cross-border services, and cross-border services are clearly highly important for scaled operations. So this is definitely an area we will have to look into, and also from a global perspective, and today is day 2 of the European Council meeting. All of our heads of states and government are sitting together not far away from here in the center of Brussels. Dual use will also become a big topic, and clearly how this industry and the civilian side of it can learn from rapid developments which are going on due to the war in Ukraine will also be a topic we'll have to look closer into. The support in when European policymakers speak is also meant as money somehow, is also under discussion, and we are currently looking into how we can foster innovation through, on the one hand, still research programs like Horizon Europe, but also through the European Defence Fund, which by now has become a very important driver of innovation, but also how to foster the deployment. We have started a while ago with the demonstrators you will be looking at here today, but on a larger scale via the European Competitiveness Fund. Now, the large building blocks have been put out by the Commission before the summer. What is still needed is to come to a clear understanding with the European Parliament, with the member states, on how the interplay between these instruments will work, who will manage them, how to make it possible to be visible and understandable for the users, because they need to know where do I need to go with my ideas. The regulatory framework has evolved. We need to take stock on what have we achieved in our drones strategy 2.0, because we made progress. We know for a number of areas, agricultural spraying has been mentioned, what needs to be done in order to open up markets. But there are also areas where we need to hear more from you, the stakeholders, about ideas. And here my message to you is also the stakeholders and the applications are super diverse, which is also difficult for policymakers then to create horizontal conditions that would allow to scale up. So I think you also have to do some work, and some industry associations have already put ideas together and we will study them, but you will also have to gather, and whilst and this is market and entrepreneurial spirit, how you compete with each other, but still what horizontally you ask for together. And when I say you, it's everybody who wants to be in the air ultimately, because also one element which is still a huge construction zone is the element of how do we integrate drone operations into what I would call ATM, conventional airspace, as we all know it when we take a plane from Brussels airport and take off here. And that is certainly an area where more needs to be done. But we are committed in doing that together with you. And we hope that the projects that will be presented here today are a step. And we are fully committed to embark on this review. Now, on the details, one element is clear: we will try to bring the communities together and assess what has been achieved. On what then precisely will be done, it would be too early for me, because that would mean we don't care about what the stakeholders are telling us and that we don't want to do. So it would be too early for me to tell you what precisely we'll be going to do. But clearly an important element will be the civil-military interface. And on that one, things are currently, as we are sitting here together, super fluid with our heads of state sitting also together. And what I can tell you is that we will be committed to see what precisely can be done. EASA will be an important partner in this. And we are also thinking of what can we do to help EASA and military stakeholders to better learn from each other, and also how to help our member states to set up regulatory sandboxes to test on a cross-border scale, for instance, services, but also links with the defense dimension. So, building on this, I think it's clear that especially the U-space is an important element, and we are also hoping that this year we will still see in Switzerland and our host state Belgium here some designations for U-space areas, which clearly will also reveal a potential for making things simpler, because I know that it is very challenging for a public authority, for a state to designate a U-space area and to take the responsibility for safe and secure operations happening therein. And I'm not even speaking about operations. I know the industry is calling for that outside the U-space, because there you have the e-conspicuity topic. I'm using the word maybe you are more often than you, Jean-Christophe, but that is then of course also the visibility topic. That is then also an issue where others are concerned, general aviation and the like, but also here I think we have some ideas on how this could be taken forward, and thanks to technology, how to take this forward in a cost-effective way. So, with that, I wish you lots of energy, entrepreneurial spirit, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about the individual projects. I cannot stay the whole day, but I will try to stay a little bit. And as I've said, our doors will be wide open, in particular in 2026, to take stock and create ideas with you for making things simpler, but sticking to the concepts which we are still convinced we have coined a while ago and which should be implemented. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and let us thank our keynote speakers once again for their astute reflections. Thank you very much to both. I would like to take the advantage of their presence with us today to mention the closing event of the Sapphire Ready Fast Track project, which has a space in the exhibition area as well, on the 31st of March 2026 in Liège, with the confirmed participation of the Prime Minister of Belgium. So definitely this is very high on the political agenda of our host state here in Belgium. So mark your calendars. For the next 60 to 75 minutes, we will hear from seasoned experts about their involvement in the BURDI project and the associated key results. Please welcome Mr. Simon Devoldereux, UTM Manager at Sky Eyes, Mr. Jean-Pierre Demuth, Regulatory UTM Expert at Sky Drone, Mr. Manolis from the Future Needs Management Consulting, and Mr. Vasilis Agoridas, Founder and Managing Director at 4Create. For this session, again, we have created a virtual Q&A space on Slido. So if you want to ask your questions as they are presenting, please scan that QR code. And again, as yesterday, if there is enough time, we'll take questions live in the room. If not, speakers have committed to answer in writing. So none of the content will be lost. So welcome to the speakers. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I'm just going to highlight or explain a little bit the agenda for today. So regarding BURDI, we actually have 2 sessions. In the morning, it's the less technical or non-technical session. In the afternoon, it's then the real action as requested. Normally speaking, a live demo that we'll execute in the port environment with multiple drones. So as said, this part will be first non-technical, focusing on other elements that need to be combined to get to a working U-space airspace. And I'm quite happy that I have a lot of experts along with me, so I will keep my part rather short and let the real experts do the explanation. So my first part, let's go forward. I will go fast over this first part because that already we discussed yesterday, and I saw most of people were here yesterday as well. So we have, of course, a dedicated timeline for this project. We're almost at the final end. We have a lot of partners involved and even a lot more people which are not on the slide as well. Most important is that we have actually really the full ecosystem available in our project. We have ANSPs, we have police departments, we have Belgian Defense. I have seen my colleagues from Defense in the room as well. Thank you, Simon. Present as well, allowing us to discuss, to go into detail on how to actually start operations even in military airspace, especially in Belgium. We have quite an exotic mix of airspace volumes, so it was important to be able to discuss with them as well. These were our solutions. We focused really on where we are implementing U-space airspace, as every type of airspace has its own specific requirements. And then, of course, this is one slide I really like, just to explain how all different elements need to come together at the end. Again, I demonstrated this yesterday. We're almost at the full all-green mark, ready to start the operations. Still, I'm still using the almost because we want to be 100% sure. Before we start this type of operations, we need U-space airspace published. We need the drone operators fully integrated, USSP certified, and our CISP all ready. So we need all 4 of them all together. Now, the geographical focus, the scope of our project was rather mixed. I will go to the next one to give you an idea on what we actually did up until now. So, to be able to start your operation in U-space airspace, you need, first of all, a overarching, let's say, U-space concept, a real concept of operation. That allows you to operate in all volumes. But of course, each specific volume will have its own particularities. So you need to have in your ARA, first of all, your reference scenario, a CONOPS, and then a final report. Today, we were able to incorporate in our overarching CONOPS all elements required to be operational in the volumes we had foreseen. We were able to create all the reference scenarios for the ARA. The concept of operations dedicated to the different volumes were completed for the Port of Antwerp and for the CTR of Antwerp. For the HTAs, the CTR of Brussels and Liège, we are still in a preparatory phase. And for the final reporting to complete the ARA process, from a BURDI perspective, we completed our inputs for our Civil Aviation Authority, which is now verifying and validating the last elements so that we can present the document to the minister after all. Together with our U-space coordinator, Vasilis, we conducted the coordination mechanism for the Port of Antwerp. And now, of course, the last and final piece will then be the publication. You can see for some of our areas, we have grayed out some of the activities that we first had planned because we just see that due to time constraints and due to we need to stay realistic as well, we were not able to conduct all elements until the final part. Now, how did we actually then start our activities? We've taken a look at the AMC and GM, and we discovered that still quite some gray areas were identified, and therefore we needed to find out how can we demystify all these? Demystifying by creating dedicated definitions and methods of calculation to come up with all the different values. I will go deeper into detail later on. Those how-tos were then used in the ARA documentation to create the actual values. On the left-hand side of this slide, you can see a very small overview of all the different parameters that we came across into the AMC and GM, that sometimes even terms were mixed or being used multiple times at another spot or for another reason. Well, the first task was really to decipher all of these and to come up with what is the actual intention of this description and what we try to achieve. And now I go a little bit more into detail on this. So for example, deviation threshold, quite a lot of times it is mentioned in the AMC and GM. And first of all, we had to find out what is the starting point. So and I see it now being taken on board by other projects that are going to follow up on the DSD, so that's very interesting, that the plant volume, what does a drone operator need to introduce into the USSP platform? That's the first fundamental question, because that will be your starting point. What is that starting point? Is it linked to the SORA? How is it linked? Which volumes? All of these questions have been posed, we tried to decipher it and we tried to find a solution for it. So within the documentation of the BURDI project in the CONOPS, you will find from time to time specific sections that state clearly, this is a BURDI decision and statement. Okay, we have taken this approach because of X, Y, Z. And that's for each and every topic that you see here, it is actually the case. For example, for deviation threshold, we could see that in SORA, elements are taken on board. Regarding deviation threshold, other elements, sometimes the same, are taken on board. So what we deciphered is really looking at a, let's call it, target level of safety is not the correct term, but how much of contingency do we try to achieve? And in the regulation you could find, or in the AMC and GM, you could find that 95%. Then it's really, let's say, let's turn that knob until which level are we confident that the drone will remain inside. What we did up until now is we turned up that knob up until 99%. And then, of course, we had to increase, let's say, the contingency volume of your operation. And that is actually the calculation for the deviation threshold. So that was a way to demystify a lot and to make the calculations or to make the volume calculations easier. Of course, you have fixed wing drones, you have rotary wing drones, they fly at different speeds. So you could see a link with other parameters such as operational conditions and constraints, which are deciphered, which are requested in the Annex 1, if I'm not mistaken, when you are designating U-space airspace. So if you want to have volumes or you want to have calculations that stick, you need to have some way, a link to the operational conditions and constraints. It's like when you buy a Ferrari, it's able to drive 300 kilometers an hour, but if you're driving in a city center, you're not allowed. It's kind of the same approach. We do not want to, let's say, put a limitation on which drone you can use in U-space airspace, but we're going to limit your use so you can comply to different elements and parameters deciphered and defined in the ARA documentation. For example, for proximity, a term which is used quite often in the AMC and GM as well, we actually found that there are two different volumes, two different parameters to calculate. Because of the difference in speed, there is a difference between a drone flying and a manned aircraft flying. I will keep it rather brief on this one because if I'm not mistaken, we have Jean-Pierre of Skyline, which is much more an expert in this domain, and he will tackle this later on, so I go quickly to the next one. For example, geographical proximity, you could say, yeah, but you just talked about proximity. Well, this is yet another one. So, and each and every parameter is linked to another component. One is linked, for example, to the drone itself. And this one is then linked to, for example, the flight plan. Geographical proximity is, in this case, as a USSP, I need to be able to see my own or the drones that I am managing. So it's linked to not the U-space airspace. It's not linked to the drone, it's linked to supporting a flight plan. So in this case, this parameter, we've linked it to the flight plan itself. When we talk about minimal coverage, well, I need to take 2 or 3 steps back, going back to proximity. Proximity, it's about showing you where other traffic is. But if you want to be able to show you a traffic, you need to be able to see them. So linking the proximity to the minimum coverage is a must. But in this case, the minimal coverage will tell you at which moment do you need to be able to see or to detect the traffic. So minimal coverage, you can link it to, for example, if you want to avoid the traffic, as according to the 947, the drone operator is responsible to avoid any conflict, well, then you need to make it possible for him to see the traffic and to avoid it. So that's why we defined the minimal coverage, which was the buffer discussed yesterday around U-space airspace on the outside. It's not the idea at this moment from a BURDI perspective to have a fixed publication on this, but this is still, we have to find a way how we're going to publish this really to make this a hard, tangible solution, of course. And this is the image used yesterday as well. Now, what's next? And I try to be rather brief because I have a lot of other colleagues who want to say their part as well. So what's next? And here I want to express a little concern that I saw the last few years. We've been focusing very hard on U-space implementation. How will U-space work? Does it work? Well, from a BURDI perspective, I'm almost 100% sure, yes, U-space works. We've tested services. We've tested how drone operators will get their authorization. U-space as such, yes, we know how it works. Traffic information, no worries. But let's take a few steps back. And it's very important not to lose oversight or lose the complete picture. In Belgium, I said it already yesterday, we have 649 geo zones. In those geo zones, you already have certain authorizations required prior flying. For example, to fly even overhead the runway in Brussels, it's possible. You just need to submit a flight plan. But it's possible. We can accommodate that as ANSP. So a lot is possible, but you need to request it. Well, due to a rather complex buildup of geozones, it's possible in Belgium that for one flight, you need 9 authorizations, so you need to file 9 requests. You fly an operation in the specific category, you complete your SORA, you request your operational authorization, that's one. You're in a geozone, which overlaps with a few others. It's each and every time a request to be allowed to access a geozone. If you're going to put on top of that U-space, that's yet another one. And you can imagine, as a drone operator, you want to be able to tell your customer, I'll be there, I'll support your request. Otherwise, the economy will never fly. It will never work. So we need to find a way how to integrate all of these requests, how to make this end-to-end work, that actually a customer that requires support of a drone operator does not have that big question mark on top of his request and never sure about getting the service he needs. So that is one thing that we need to take into account. Another part, and this is actually linked to a lot of changes in geopolitical activities the last few months, it's about registration. Yes, it's true, we have remote ID. We can have the operator ID inserted into the drone and capture the direct remote ID to know who's flying. But what we see out of some tests we done together with some partners in Belgium, that a lot of people are not doing that activity. And as well, the C0 drones, for example, are exempted from this, but they are used a lot because they are very, very well to use, even for professional users. DJI Mini, it works very fine. It's stable in bad weather, no worries. So it is used. We need to adapt to reality as well. So here, if we want to be able to not only detect, because detection is one, but we need to know who it is. We need to be able to track it and to assess, because only at that moment you're able to react. We do not want to get into a situation where a drone flying from a hospital to another hospital is being jammed because of a drone detection system said, yeah, there is a drone flying there, but actually we don't know who it is and what it's doing. That is really a risk for drone economy to grow. Then last but not least, and it's sometimes the elephant in the room, but I think today it's not, cost. There is, for me, according to me, there is a direct link with the volume that we describe as being U-space airspace. If you have a very small U-space airspace, you will have only a few flights going on. So you only have a few operators able to consume services, to pay eventually for those services. Let's be honest, eventually, yes, drone operators will compensate the people who accommodate them, because that's what we're doing, for that additional service. But of course, if you only have a few operators paying, you will never get your investment back. So why would you, as an organization, invest in becoming a USSP, invest in infrastructure, or invest in the complete outroll of your certification process if you're not sure about return on investment? Those are 3 concerns that I see, 3 things that we will have to tackle in, according to me, the near future, because before scaling, we need to know what we're scaling for and where we're scaling towards. That was my last part, and now I leave the floor to people with other challenges and other questions. Jean-Pierre, please feel free.
Well, thank you. Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Simon, and thank you for the presentation that came before me. I actually have the pleasure this morning of using, I would say, the power of repetition. I'll show you what I'm talking about. Let me first maybe briefly introduce who Skydrone is, extremely briefly. Skydrone has the ambition to become a USSP. That's why, first of all, we participated in the BURDI project. We were demanding party to become a USSP, and that's what this presentation is going to be all about. It's about how to become a USSP, what are the challenges while being a USSP, and how can we scale up. So there were a few thunders that were stolen, I think, by Jean-Christophe and Christine, because the message is indeed, how can we scale up? That's why we are here around the table, all of us. We're all being paid for having drones in the air. So the key question, as Simon, I would say, a transition left there, how can we make the market bigger? How can we scale up? And that's what I wanted to first of all say. Well, a big thank you to SESAR and to CINEA, because without SESAR and CINEA, we wouldn't have been standing here. Skydrone would have not been able to at least accomplish part of our ambition. We would have never been able to create that airspace risk assessment that Simon was referring to. So it was a huge help. It did more than making a difference, but at the same time, I'm here to kind of spoil a little bit of the enthusiasm that was heard, and I want to concur with what Christine has been presenting. Have we been doing a lot? Yes. Is there still a lot to do? Absolutely. Have we reached where we're going for? No, far from that. And I'll elaborate on that a little bit more, because there's a lot to do. And I want to maybe, again, in the power of repetition, go to some of the aspects, or go back to some of the aspects that were already mentioned before, because I'm profoundly convinced we all kind of stuck in a weird, vicious circle that I want to just present here and put on the table. If we look at what's happening today, BVLOS flights require approvals that are slow and complex. Whether we like it or not, having your SORA approved as an operator is a bit of a challenge. It's complex, it takes time, the resources at the CAs are very limited today, so a typical transition period between applying for an operational authorization and getting one, at least in Belgium, with the resources at the CAs being very limited, typically ends up months. So there are today in Belgium a limited number of BVLOS operations. Thank God, maybe we are still the leader, and maybe I'm a little bit too pessimistic, but I prefer to be too pessimistic and come with a scale than being too optimistic. So there's a very limited number of BVLOS operations today, which leads obviously to people like ourselves to a very small market. And that's, the business case is not an easy one for the operators and for the people that support those operators. So without approvals, there's only a limited market. Without a limited market, there's two consequences. Well, companies can't scale up, obviously, and there is still a limited sense of urgency at the regulators. I'm maybe pointing to an elephant in the room, but that's what we feel. There's a lot of goodwill, there's a lack of resources, and why are there lack of resources at the regulatory side? Very often because there is no sense of urgency, and that's what we see. So we need to fix that, and that sense of urgency, of course, leads to the fact that authorities see low demand and don't prioritize rulemaking. That's my feeling, at least. So we end up in that vicious circle where the regulatory framework delays just end up preventing the scaling. So that's what we need to solve as such, and that's what I want to highlight to start off with, is without the framework there will be no growth. If there is no growth, there seems to be no framework. So how do we get out of that conundrum, so to speak, is what I want to step by step move forward to. And let's maybe start by the first element of becoming a USSP is it's all about certification. It hasn't been addressed in a level of detail yet, but obviously you cannot become a USSP without being certified. We as Skydrone are in the middle of that certification process. Is it an easy process? No, it isn't. Is it easy for us? No, it is not. Is it easy for the people certifying us? No, it is not. In Belgium, for example, the CA has been using a lot of help from EASA. So that process is ongoing. But I want to highlight two elements of that certification process. And the first element is, obviously, we are being certified as an organization in showing or having to show that we are really capable of doing what we are supposed to do as a USSP. And I think that's a very good point. It makes me think of the certification process of an ANSP, by the way, and they're right. The rules should be strict. We should have a software assurance program that is decent. We should have cybersecurity processes in place that are up to par to what we are doing in aviation. So let there be no doubt when we're talking about security, when we're talking about cybersecurity, when we're talking about safety, our safety assurance processes should be up to par with ANSPs. Let there be no doubt about that one. So that's a big part of the certification process, which for small companies is not always an easy thing to do. At Skydrone, we have an aviation background. I haven't mentioned that, by the way. Some people look at Skydrone as being a daughter company or an affiliate of Skies, the ANSP. We are not exactly that. I forgot to mention that at the beginning. Skydrone is a joint venture between Skies and Brussels Airport Company. So we are a commercial company with a certain runway, by the way. I'll come back to that. But we are fed by commercial incomes. We are a service provider today. More about that later on. But coming back to the certification process, so one level is showing that we are up to par to do what we do. But the second part, I think, is heavily underestimated up until now. And it is, how are we supposed to offer those services? And it ties into what Simon has been saying before, and I want to again use the power of repetition. It has already been mentioned, and I think Christina, you already referred to it too, simplification. I just want to go back in time, and this is a copy of a slide that you have in front of us, in front of you rather, that dates back June 2023. So it's 2.5 years old in the meantime. And let me go back to that, and it was a workshop, a very well organized workshop, by the way, by EASA on the publication of the AMCs and the GMs. And that workshop was there to clarify some of the issues. There were also promises made there, and the discussions was that there would be, you can read it there, discussions on the AMC GM will be re-engaged in the beginning of 24, and there would be updates expected in 2025. That calendar has changed. It has shifted with almost 2 years. So let me maybe make, again, some repetition and some statements. Do we need simplification? Yes, we do need simplification, but we most of all need, I would say, a cleanup. Do we need resources? Do we need more resources at EASA? I'm one that preaches very easily. I don't know if Stefan was here yesterday. There we are. We need 4 of those at least, is my message that I would want to bring. So Stefan is doing a great job. Is he moving forward fast enough? No. Is he doing the best he can? Yes. Do we need more of those? Yes, please. So my message, I cannot repeat it more. We need more resources at the CAA. There's 4 of them presenting there. So that's more or less fixed, I would say. Do we need more at EASA? Please, because it's one of the key messages that I want to bring is simplification and rather cleanup of the AMCs is a prerogative. And let me use some examples. Simon has already been referring to it from a ConOps point of view. There's too much interpretation going on. And that's exactly what we did within BURDI. So again, thank you for SESAR and for CINEA. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been forced to put what I always tend to call sticks in the ground. If you encounter a gray zone and you want to move forward, there's only one option. You put a stick in the ground and you say, you know what, that's how we're going to do it. If somebody disagrees, please move the stick. But I don't want to have any discussions anymore on where to put that stick. We just decided that we've put it there. You end up with very interesting discussions when you do that. And that's exactly what we did within the BURDI project. And I'm using as an example here, I don't want to go into too much detail, but some of you love that level of detail, I would think. But what you see on the left is a diagram on how network identification data should be exchanged between USSPs. What the regulation says is that obviously Without going into too much technical detail, every USSP needs to know where his customers are flying. So the real-time location of the drone is what in-network identification is all about. And remember, the spirit of U-space is if everybody knows where everybody's flying, we're doing it safely, both crewed and uncrewed. So exchanging the information on real-time position of drones is essential. What you see on the left is what I just said, is what the legislation says. The legislation says that USSPs should exchange that among themselves using a platform non-defined. It's one of the elements that were deliberately left open in the legislation because the element there was let the market play. I think the message of DG Move at that point in time, and still is to a large extent, we don't need to control everything, let the market play. That was, Koen is nodding, he was kind of the author of that principle, I think. So we all agree, let the market play. So on the left again, let the market play. The USSPs should decide on how they interact. So every USSP talks to every USSP. We exchange that information. It's being shared with the general public. It's being shared with the ANSPs. It's being shared with the single CISP. And it's shared with other authorized users. Think about the police. So that's what the legislation says. What we did on the right is we decided within BURDI, and by the way, what I heard yesterday is the same approach of ÉALÚ-AER. What was decided there is let's facilitate. Let's, again, rather than waiting for the USSPs to appear and to, from some type of magic, decide on how to do it, we just create a shared platform managed by SKYS, by the way. God forbid that that dinosaur would be involved in that process. It was with the initial thoughts for some people. But yet again, I think everybody agreed, it can be a third party, so why not SKYS? We had plenty of discussions, including with Stefan at some point in time, as he might remember. So that's how we did it. That's how we are moving forward today. That platform is in place, that exchange is happening, is possible today. If you look at some other alternatives that were presented, and harmonized SKYS, I think what is happening with FOCA, for example, is completely different. There, the approach is a little bit more US-centric and says, you know what, let's use discovery services, let's use the principles that exist in the internet, which is yet another way. Is it good? Is it bad? I'm not here to take any position on that one. We put the stick somewhere else in BURDI. In FOCA, the stick is put somewhere else. So that's fine. I don't want to elaborate too much on who's right and who's wrong on that one. I think our common goal is to try to implement U-space as soon as possible, as quickly as possible. And I know that's also the mission of FOCA in Switzerland, be it not yet, or will in a more phased approach than what we are doing in Belgium. But that's a totally different story. Simon referred to some of the parameters in the CONOPS that we as a USSP are still wondering how we should correctly interpret that. Some of it ties to the airspace risk assessment. That is a member state responsibility. So I think we're always on a thin line between EASA being clear on common rules and the member states still being left with their responsibility of being responsible for the airspace. I think one of the key elements there is the responsibility of the member states for the airspaces. I'll come back to that later on. Actually, Simon promised that I would go into more detail on the proximity. I'm going to just use one simple example on that proximity. And remember, the proximity is the area around your drone that the USSP, that me, I need to show the operator where crewed aviation is flying. That's what proximity is. I need to show all the manned aircraft around the real-time location of the drone. What does the legislation say? The legislation refers to an American standard, which refers to a diagonal of a rectangle. That's very well in the US, where you have that information on the phone, which indeed is a rectangular screen. From a risk perspective, there's no reason to use a rectangular. That risk of the airplane around the drone is circular. So that area should be circular. That was a remark that we made back in June 2023 to the regulator and saying, this does not make sense. It makes no sense to use a rectangular shape. It should be a circular shape. Yet we as a USSP, we kind of left in the middle. So I'm not going to go too much in that one. The ARA, so as Simon presented, we did an airspace risk assessment together with the Belgian Civil Aviation Authority. That risk assessment ended up by saying, you know what, let's make a distinction between what we call the proximity for US. A drone flies a lot slower than an airplane, so showing those values should be different between a drone and an airplane. Another example, Simon actually mentioned to it, when we talk about deviation threshold, people are still wondering what a deviation threshold is. Actually, a deviation threshold is used in the deconfliction of drone flight plans. If you have your drone flight plan of drone A, flight plan of drone B, to event, of course, from a strategic, so from a pre-flight point of view confliction, we do what is called strategic deconfliction. We deconflict those flight plans, but when doing that, we need to add what the legislation calls a deviation threshold. Just to be sure, we need to add a buffer around the flight plan, and it's including that buffer that we then deconflict. It's a safety margin that is added. How big is that safety margin? Comes out of the airspace risk assessment. It's a member state responsibility. Taking a 50,000 feet high approach, I still wonder, by the way, an airplane is an airplane. A French airplane is not fundamentally different from a German airplane. So making that calculation of that deviation threshold, to my opinion, shouldn't differ too much in France as it is in Germany. But it's, again, what we recommend is some level of harmonization. What we did as stick in the ground, we said, you know what? The operational volume as we know it for your SORA is the one that we will be using for the flight plan. So that's yet another stick in the ground that we used. We're going to save some time. In the legislation, there's very much a reference to, first of all, restrictions, but sometimes it's called limitations, sometimes it's called constraints. I don't want to go into too much detail, but it needs some cleaning up is the message. Gaining some time, another example is what we call non-conformance. And in the airspace risk assessment in Belgium, the non-conformance service was judged to be obligatory. There's a level of elements. Looking at the clock, I'm not going to go into too much detail. I'll actually go to the next slide, which shows that if an operator, and it's called operator 1 on the left side, when that one is leaving his flight plan, so that drone operator is no longer conforming with his flight plan, so there's an alarm obviously being generated to that operator. It's called conformance monitoring alerting. Now the legislation says that all other operators flying in the vicinity of that operator 1 should also be informed, which is logical. How much is that vicinity? Is it 1 nautical mile? Is it half a nautical mile? Is it 2 nautical mile? Has not been defined in the legislation. So yet another stick in the ground that we had to take, which will lead to a lack of harmonization. That's becoming a USSP. Maybe some more detail on staying a USSP, and there's a number of elements that can be mentioned in that. And the first of all, it ties to certification and to some of discussions that were ongoing yesterday. How is a USSP supposed to earn its money? And that ties, as I just said, to the certification process, because one of the documents that we have to submit in the process of the certification is a business plan. That business plan is obviously full of assumptions. Yesterday the question was raised, who should pay for the implementation of U-space? Well, Simon already referred to it to a large extent, whether we like it or not, the drone operators in some way, in some shape or form. And that directly ties into what I've mentioned here on the slide, the value-added services race. In my mind, it's clear that if a USSP needs to be limited, or is limiting itself rather to what I call the vanilla-flavored U-space services, so the geo-awareness, flight authorization, network identification, those services is what I call vanilla-flavored services. Everybody's going to offer them because they are mandatory. It's like the mobile operators. They all offer calling with the phone and SMSing. The difference is going to be in the value-added services on top of it. What can we as a USSP offer in terms of, for example, ground risk assessment? It was mentioned yesterday, data on dynamic population density. That information are the information that we will be using to be competitive, because I don't want to mention Google Wing too much, but I did it once at least. Maybe those guys will come into the market with a freeware service, where those vanilla flavored services are going to be for free. Who are we then as a USSP to be competitive? So there's plenty of assumptions in that business case that we had to submit for certification. Second element in that value-added services race, as I referred before, is maybe the link to those SORA. Simon mentioned it, there's quite a challenge for the drone operator to get an operational authorization. That's what we will be helping in. But one of the Elements that Simon also referred to is the value-added services of providing flight authorization services to the operator that are actually issued by the geozone managers. And I'm just as a reminder to those who are not familiar with that process of flight authorization, what you see on the left is there's plenty of geozones, and Simon already mentioned there's 600 of them in Belgium. You can think of all the prisons, think of all the small airports, all the heliports. They all have their individual geozones, and in order to be able to fly in those geozones, you need to get what is called a flight authorization. In the framework of BURDI, by the way, we tend to call it, or we have consistently called it, a flight permission, to make a difference with the flight authorization, because a flight permission is indeed granted by the geozone manager. I saw that presentation yesterday of the French cluster. That's exactly what is happening there, is front-ending the geozone flight authorization. But what is it? Well, the mandate of that geozone manager is actually limited to granting that flight authorization. It's the equivalent of what I call a private parking lot. It's just a barrier that is there, and it's opened up or it's closed. And it's in function of known access conditions. So the geozone manager decides what access conditions apply. It could be the pilot needs to wear a yellow jacket, whatever it is. That's what the geozone manager does. The USSP, of course, has also a flight authorization, but that flight authorization is purely based on deconfliction of strategic deconfliction of those flight plans. So there's a fundamental difference between a flight authorization issued by a geozone manager and a flight authorization issued by a USSP. But they do coexist. So the question we need to ask ourselves as a USSP each and every time is closely linked to a national decision, actually, and it all ties down to airspace management. And the people from airspace management are here from Belgium. But the fundamental question that arises also in the port of Antwerp, for example, but the same could be said on all the other geozones. If we implement U-space airspace, do we just put it on top of what Simon was just mentioning, on top of the existing ones with yet another flight authorization, not the geozone one, but an additional one, based on the USSP flight deconfliction? Or do we actually take into account U-space and maybe simplify a little bit more and get rid of the existing geozones? Why not? Maybe we can absorb the access conditions that exist in existing geozones and absorb them into U-space airspace in order to facilitate life of a lot of people. Maybe that geozone manager actually is not interested in having flight authorizations. Maybe that geozone manager simply wants to know who's flying there. That information can be provided by the USSPs. It's actually shared with the CISP. So there are practical solutions to the same problem that we cannot dissociate from the implementation of U-space, and that were one of the challenges that we in the BURDI project were faced with and had to solve, or at least make fundamental assumptions. We're getting closer to the end, but I do want to refer to something that was already mentioned also by Christine previously, is the effect of what we're seeing now in our neighboring countries. Well, thank God not yet in our neighboring countries, but I would say close to us, what's happening in Ukraine and the geopolitical situation. There's a lot of attention from a political level into counter-UAV. And by the way, we as a potential USSP, we already offer today drone detection services. So in our portfolio of Skydrone, we offer drone detection services, waiting for U-space airspace to be implemented, by the way. And that begs the question, what's the role of a USSP in counter-UAV measures in drone detection? I've mentioned it yesterday several times. It's not an obligation of a USSP to do drone detection. It's an obligation of a USSP to know where his customer drones are flying, but not necessarily to do non-cooperative drone detection. So it's a challenge that at some point in time we need to solve, and if we're not going to solve it proactively, from a civil point of view, it's going to be solved by the military. It's going to be pretty simple. So we need to come up with a basic solution, including in the regulation, what are the roles and the responsibilities in terms of non-cooperative traffic. I don't want to repeat my yesterday's presentation, but non-corporate traffic, there's two flavors to it. The non-cooperative ones that are non-cooperative to U-space, that decided not to become a customer of U-space, and then the non-cooperative ones that decided to not give their location in real time. Again, that was the subject of the debate yesterday. In the legislation today, the only link that exists is that a USSP, if he detects non-cooperative traffic, then he should take into account that presence of a non-cooperative drone when granting a flight authorization activation. But the if is of course a big if. Where does it stop? Where does it start from a counter, or at least from a drone detection point of view, is something that needs to be solved, because it's what I mentioned yesterday. If we don't succeed in differentiating from the friends and the foes, everybody is going to be considered a foe by the military. So solving that conundrum is going to be essential. And that actually brings me to the end of my presentation in showing you where I think we are currently in the middle of. It's one of my favorite slides. I've presented everywhere I come. Simon is laughing. But I think it's fundamental that from a industry point of view, and the industry is just as well the CAAs as us as an industry, but we need to come up, even maybe from a European point of view, we need to come up with a solution that covers the three elements. What I see today is those three elements are very often tackled in isolation. And let me go through them one by one. Airspace management, including U-space airspace. We've mentioned geozones. What about the mandate of a geozone manager granting flight permissions? That's again a national responsibility, but it might be worthwhile to have a look at it. That's what's happening in Belgium at least, and wondering how can we do geozone management a little bit better, because that demand to have a geozone is growing by the day. Every police officer wants to have his little geozone, every event wants to have its little geozone, every prison wants to have its little geozone. So controlling that on a national scale is going to be fundamental, I haven't mentioned it a lot, but if you look in Belgium, for example, where are the operators that fly BVLOS today most often? Well, I can tell you it's the police departments, it's the fire brigades. They all have bought a drone in a box, and flying as state operator is becoming one of the favorite ways of getting around the regulations. They don't need to comply with U-space, although U-space has intrinsically made a lot possible for state operators. There is a priority mechanism embedded in U-space. That doesn't make any sense to have that if there's not some level of opting in. And if I look at the member states, opting in is not what I see happening very often. While from a safety point of view, I don't think we can no longer allow ourselves to have the state operators set aside. We're sharing the same airspace. We're sharing most definitely the same very low level airspace. So having a look, and maybe from a European point of view, although it's a member state responsibility, but can we please have a look at the opt-in scenarios individually, country by country? And then drone detection, I see a lot of military initiatives going on for drone detection. Again, those three are concisely linked to each other. And let me end by making a statement, or by going to our favorite topic that both Christine and Jean-Christophe also mentioned, and that's the scaling. Because whenever we succeed of becoming a USSP, whenever we succeed of staying a USSP, and I've mentioned the value and the value-added services and the money associated to it, I think we still have a challenge of scaling up. We in BURDI put a lot of sticks in the ground. Some other people elsewhere have put their sticks a little bit different in the ground. So there's plenty of sticks. I'm thinking this morning, I was again asking myself, I'll come back to it. But the main message I want to bring here is that if we don't succeed in aligning among the member states, we'll end up with a patchwork. That's why I've tried to make visible here. We end up with a patchwork of implementations that will kill the scale, that will kill our livelihood. We are a commercial company. We have a certain runway before we need to substantially have our revenues coming in. We now have a large extent our revenues coming in from drone detection. Nobody's surprised about that, I would think. But the civil market simply needs to be scaled up, and we need to get rid of that patchwork. We all need, I see the gentleman from Ireland, we all need the manas of this world being able to fly a little bit more across Europe. So I'm here to end up with my presentation in asking maybe a little bit, even a little bit more Europe in that patchwork. So I think the industry is here. We as USSP and GUTMA as USSP community, we're here to please beg for more harmonization so we can all live to see that scaling up that we all need so much. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. So I'm going to go a bit less technical, less operational from the rest. I'm going to talk about the economics behind drones and specifically U-space public benefit. So this is part of our BURDI work. Let me look up here. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, I'm Manuel Spandelidis. I have Nikki with me, behind me, who she also helped me on this presentation. So let me begin. Why do we assess public benefits? First, financial models overlook legitimacy, tend to overlook legitimacy, trust, and equity. Traditional financial models typically include only revenue, capex, and OPEX figures, not accounting for social acceptance and governance performance, which can make or break implementation. So BURDI's analysis demonstrates that public attitudes towards safety, privacy, and equity can directly influence operational scalability and justify use of public funds. Second, public benefits determine social acceptance. U-space will operate in shared airspace and urban environments. The public is not just a beneficiary, but an active stakeholder. Acceptance strongest when visible societal value exists. Think of use cases such as medical logistics, emergency response, and environmental monitoring. So assessing public benefits ensures that technological progress aligns with social expectations and regulatory approval. Number 3, policy coherence with European frameworks. So public benefits assessment anchors BURDI within EU and SESAR policy goals, bridging aviation and sustainable mobility. Now, continuing from the last point of the previous slide, in order to show you the way how we assess public benefits, we actually combine SESAR key performance areas, so KPIs such as safety, security, environment, public acceptance, with sustainable urban mobility indicators, specifically sustainable urban air mobility indicators, which actually integrate mobility, accessibility, noise, and environmental performance. These are also linked with the associated UN SDGs. And therefore, the above help us form what we define as U-space public benefits, which are then assessed through a cost-benefit analysis, based first on the European Commission CBA guide, and secondly on SESAR's CBA model, which has been developed by our host here, Eurocontrol. Essentially, this hybrid method allows us for both an economic and societal evaluation. Now, 5 key sets, 5 main examples, let's say, of social or public benefits that we are looking at today. So first of all, we have safety. Safety benefits from replacing humans in high-risk tasks, enabling real-time monitoring and early risk detection, ensuring faster response in traffic management and emergencies. Then we have security benefits, enhancing proactive response, supporting cybersecurity via secure communications and data privacy compliance, and even protecting both digital and physical assets through network-wide real-time monitoring. Third, we have environmental benefits. So coordinating drone traffic sustainably by limiting noise, hydrants, and fuel emissions, preventing unnecessary flight duplication, and enabling optimized lower energy flight paths. Fourth, we have another important social benefit, public benefit, which is basically public acceptance. So public acceptance by lowering costs and expanding access, improving service quality and reliability, and supporting equitable, resilient transport networks. Last but not least, we have job creation as a benefit. So expanding drone-enabled services across sectors, creating new roles in operations, maintenance, data regulation, and digital infrastructure as well. Now, before I go in more detail on how we assess these public benefits, let me show you some data from a survey conducted early on as part of the BURDI project. In particular, we liaised with U-space stakeholders in order to better understand the demand for it and get a clear view based on experience on how implementation of U-space will benefit both users and the public. So some insights from this survey, a demand survey essentially. 75% of the respondents, as you can see, cited regulatory compliance as the main reason they would use U-space, while half of this sample mentioned safety improvements too as an important reason. Respondents have also shown a great interest to see what's the potential of U-space and how it can further evolve in the near future, so it can be used further. Now, from the expected benefit side, when the respondents were asked that U-space implementation can yield, respondents ranked safety and operational efficiency as the main benefits they would see arising from the implementation, and then followed by attracting new customers and social and environmental impact too. So back to the public benefit side and our use of cost-benefit analysis. So our cost-benefit analysis used the delta or incremental approach, if you want, measuring the difference between two different scenarios. So first we have what we call scenario 1, the reference scenario. This is where drones operate without U-space, so limited coordination and isolated operations, and this is pretty much what we consider as the state of today, at least in our assessment. Bear in mind that in order to understand this scenario 1, like the state of today, we had to derive a benefits assessment for this scenario compared by something else, another theoretical scenario, which is the scenario 0, where no drones exist at all. But this, of course, not included, something like, a scenario 0. This was more to help us understand what's happening today. And our point of interest is the scenario 2 solution scenario. So drones integrated under U-space, coordinated, automated, safe operations, essentially. Therefore, by incremental or delta, we mean the difference between the two scenarios, which is the additional value of U-space that U-space brings to drone operations, transportation industry, and for the purpose of our presentation in terms of public benefits and local economy improvements. Some things to note. This benefit assessment has been limited to a qualitative comparison, unfortunately, because the research on these benefits and their monetization has been at a very early stage. Now, this is not the 5 set of benefits that I will be analyzing today and I mentioned earlier is only a part of our work, but we also looked at different direct and indirect user benefits. For example, multimodality, digital infrastructure, and decreased delays, congestion on transportation network as a result of a fully operational U-space. We also looked at the costs of U-space, some elements at least that were available to us. But this is not, I'm not going to be referring to this today. Please go to the full BURDI report, specifically the deliverable named Business Sustainability and Cost Efficiency for our full assessment. Now, back to the assessment. All in all, we believe U-space does have a positive impact on local communities. So let's go again through some examples and compare the benefits. So what you see on the gray bar is basically the scenario of today. So if we go safety benefits, for example, today we have lack of coordinated traffic management, and which can lead to increased accidents. Under U-space, under the solution proposed by BURDI, we have strong safety improvements due to coordinated traffic management and monitoring while allowing for safer operations, especially in densely populated areas. Security benefits. As of today, we have some basic security, so high risk of cyber and operational threats. With U-space, we have a direct advantage through operational security measures that provide a clear separation between cooperative and non-cooperative drone flights. In terms of environmental impact, environmental benefits, We believe that U-space can bring optimized routing and operations that might reduce noise. Of course, better, more drones in the sky can lead to potential increase in the number of operations, so it could remain a threat in terms of noise hydrants, for example, and the wider environmental impact. Now, in terms of public acceptance, as of today, we believe it's limited due to concerns about noise safety and lack of clear benefits. With U-space, it could be improved due to transparency, safety, and mostly visible benefits stemming from higher accessibility and affordability in transportation networks. Last but not least, again, job creation. As of today, we have some new jobs, but limited due to the lack of supporting ecosystem. With U-space, new roles can arise in operations, including system engineering, although some existing ones might be taken over by AI and digital tools. So our conclusion. At this stage, only part of the benefits and costs for deploying U-space has been properly evaluated maybe, but qualitative results definitely show clear positive outcomes across safety, security, and sustainability. This is the foundation for future socioeconomic benefits, and as such, BURDI showcases the following. So moving from cost to value, the BURDI analysis shows that U-space transforms isolated drone operations into an integrated, safe, and scalable mobility system that delivers clear social and environmental benefits. Public trust can definitely act as an enabler. Safety emerges as the strongest driver of acceptance. So when citizens see visible value, trust multiplies economic and operational impact. Governance does matter. Effective deployment requires multi-level coordination between local, national, and EU authorities, supported by transparent and participatory decision-making. Also alignment with global goals. So U-space directly supports the UN SDGs on health innovation, sustainable cities, and climate actions, among others. Finally, looking ahead, as benefits become materialized, U-space will evolve from a research concept into a trusted, sustainable element of Europe's air mobility ecosystem. And that was it. Thank you very much.